hopefully, when we go live, it should go red. It often takes a moment.
It says live
Fantastic.
to
Right.
me.
Excellent. Says it to me as well. So today, or this evening rather, I am live with Spartaboi2. How are you this evening?
I am good. How are you?
Bit knackered actually, a bit tired. My favourite football team, the team I support, has lost again. So unfortunately, I'm in a slightly rancorous mood coming into this, but never towards yourself or the topic at hand. Eh? Um, I am hoping to have a nice chat about. We are hoping to have a nice chat about the elements of society
Yeah,
which aren't so positive. The role of fascism and the far right, and what it sort of constitutes and is, which hopefully will prove interesting. Um, so
yeah. I
anything
hope we can
fitting.
find something out.
Sorry,
Sorry.
no, what did you say?
I said I hope we can find something out or figure something
Yeah,
out.
exactly, exactly. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Um, so I suppose as your the guest coming onto the channel, what would you um, say are your thoughts on fascism right now and sort of what it is and where it how it manifests and such in society in today's world and such.
Um, as to what fascism exactly is, it's really at its core is just a. It's basically like one of those revolutionary ideals that only really crop up when a situation in a nation deteriorates to a certain point under certain conditions. And obviously, it is, while it is similar to socialism in that it is a revolutionary ideal, like its base is revolution to change the existing order in what its supporters find more favorable. Its difference is that it sort of has um, a far more authoritarian goal in mind, and kind of it enforces like a social Darwinism. It seems Group A is at the top of the pyramid, Group B is below them, Group C is under them, and even in that group, there's different layers to society, and the bottom should listen to the top, and so forth.
Yeah, so a lot there that I would agree. Sorry, my phone is going off. I'm trying to just turn it off there. Professional standards on this channel, clearly. Um, what's this? So yeah, there's a lot there I agree with, right? It definitely is authoritarian. It definitely has that element of hierarchy. The in-group want to be at the top, and they create a society or reinforce a societal structure that has them at the top and everyone else beneath them, and creates an other, someone to uh, turn into the enemy of the state, enemy of the people, and suppress
Yeah.
through that
Another interesting
authoritarianism.
characteristic of fascism is the worship of the state and the worship of the voice of the state or the like dictator in question. So I'd say the true example of fascism in Nazi Germany, um, you were to be loyal to the state and by extension the head of the state, which was obviously Adolf Hitler himself.
Mm. And so, yes, I agree that they certainly have that reification of the ruling party, right, the ruling group. Um, I think that the state is the tool which is used because we live in a world in which nation states are the way we are organized, right? The people who exist in society today have been influenced by how states are formed, and so will conduct their activities through states as the mechanism for which we exist. However, I think that there is an element of fascism which we you didn't touch on there, which I think is also really important, which is that it is a reaction to existing structures. It is a continuation of many of the structures that exist in society, and so when we think about those power structures and those hierarchies and that authoritarianism, it's in service largely of people who are on the top of the previous system, to it, capitalism. Now, we immediately sort of imagine a contradiction there, right? Because capitalism is about free markets and freedom to trade and do business and such, and fascism has the opposite of that. But when we look closer at the way these systems operate, ultimately, capitalism as a system of power, fascism as a system of power, and how it's distributed and such, the overlap is there. And I think Nazi Germany is a good example, right? Like you think of the state of society in 1920s and early 1930s Europe, right? Great Depression, lots of political instability. If you look eastward, you've got the USSR, a communist revolution. Lots of capitalists in Europe had a lot of reasons to be quite fearful of the way society was going. And much of it is their own fault, right? Like the laissez-faire policies that had dominated a lot of the Western world had failed, had led to really bad things, and the management of society was a continuation of much of the colonial practices and imperial practices we'd seen from countries which were not good. But where they could have turned to fairer systems and said, yeah, let's reorganize the society, let's bring about genuine democracy, they wanted to continue their power, their dominance over the working class and their position at the top of hierarchy, social hierarchy, and turn to fascism. So Nazism obviously is authoritarian and imposes control of society via state mechanisms. But at the centre of this are capitalists who stand to make a massive fortune from, for instance, suppressing the rights of all labourers, banning all parties eventually, but specifically banning communist and far left parties that directly organise around workers' rights, crushing marginalised groups through anti-Semitism, racism, ableism, anti-LGBTQ, anyone that's going to question the social order and such, right? Anyone who's going to question the social idea.
that kind of stems from their unique fixation on social Darwinism, in that,
Well,
say,
go ahead,
like
sorry.
a homosexual couple cannot produce children, therefore they do not deserve the right to exist, and the state should not allow them to exist. That is why,
Yeah, but
say that,
that
or say someone's not mentally feeble, like they're mentally feeble or something, they have autism of like an extreme degree. Well, they aren't going to be productive, so they must be removed for the state to be more productive.
so
And
sorry, you go ahead, sorry.
it views like the state as like like an organism, like a creature. And if, say, a cell isn't contributing to that greater whole, it needs to be cut off and exercised, which is obviously horrifying.
Mm.
But obviously, that's what extreme social Darwinism gets you.
I think though there's an element of analysis which is attached to that because you're quite right. Many of the reasons, part of the reason Nazism weaponized itself against gay people and neurodivergent people was the reasons you gave. The idea that they're not competent, the idea they can't reproduce, but both of these things connect directly to capitalist discourse. A neurodivergent person is 100% capable of contributing to society, and being just their existence means they're part of society and they inherently have value because they're a human being. But through the filter of maximizing the efficiency of the workers, when you view labor as a commodity to be exploited, when you're demanding workers give their bodies over to capitalist projects of
Yeah,
finance and
I think
efficiency and
there
such,
is something to
that
describe with capitalism, as in, like, I think there's two kinds of capital. There's capital of power and capital of economy, or economic capital. And capital of power is just how much authority this, like, a government can wield, while economic capital is, say, um, like the more general, like, control of the economy, or how much the laborers can influence it. Um,
Yeah, I mean, there's many forms of capital, right? Like you're quite right. It's more than just economy. There's political, social, cultural, loads and loads. But specifically with to continue what I was saying just then, part of the reason that we see the Nazi Party and capitalists and sort of the emergence of fascism so awful for people in these groups, marginalized groups and such, is because they stand in the way of a society completely dedicated to how capital organizes. Because you could quite easily still have, like if we were to ignore all the social discriminations and such, you could have a very capitalist society on paper, which still met the needs of people who had it, right? Like you could have a society where yes, everything's privatized, everything is
could you
deregulated.
repeat that last part?
Which bit, sorry?
The last two or three sentences.
Okay, so sorry, that's all right. You could still have a capitalist society which didn't have any bigotries, right? Which didn't have like on paper, you could organize a society to follow a capitalist model of economy, which wasn't racist and sexist and homophobic and stuff. But the reason that the reason that fascists always end up going into these things is because of the projects of capital that's attached to it. They need to have a class of people to exploit, and people who don't fit into their social power structures that aren't easily able to be commodified under existing normative ideas have to be disenfranchised and eliminated, and in the case of Nazi Germany literally had genocide committed against. And I think that's a really important. That's why it's important to make the connection between fascism and capitalism, because if we look into today's society, there are a lot of overlapping traits, and there's a lot of an important connection to establish.
I don't agree with the direct like connection, but I do believe that fascism, when it takes root, it will inherently try to cannibalize and sort of configure itself around an existing capitalist structure.
But can we see that?
So
Because
it'll say, um, so trying to collect my thoughts. Um, say like the bill, like it won't have support of all the billionaires, so it'll exercise those who you know, do not benefit the party. But those who do will be given increasingly more power and dominance over the markets because they are loyal party members, and
right,
it takes the existing system and it further corrupts it, even though it is not the best system. It Fascism proves that it can be much worse.
well, of course, right. Fascism is a worse system than capitalism, but I think the important element is that there is still a clear link, right? Like the billionaires that go along with fascism aren't just doing that because they are like inherently uh, evil. Like obviously, I mean, how do I express that? Fascism, of course, is horrible and evil and such, and it's important to stress that as well. But at the same time, it's also a set of economic choices which capitalists make because they feel it's the best way for them to maintain their power, their capital. The billionaires, for instance, that rally around Trump today aren't just doing so because they're like radicalized into MAGA like Elon Musk is. They also
They
recognize
simply
that
smell a better. They simply believe that it will get them more money, and
exactly, right?
the
Exactly. So they know that they will make a lot of money from someone who's going to deregulate the economy, that's going to hand massive amounts of state assets to private investors and private capitalists, that doesn't believe that there's any problem with someone having billions of pounds whilst the poorest in society basically starve, right? And similarly, in Nazi Germany, in fascist Italy, in places where fascism has taken root, we see the same thing. We see big investors and big businessmen and financiers happy to come and be with fascism, even as it proves to be a disaster for the society, because they've got a lot of economic gains to gain from it. And lo and behold, Nazi Germany obviously was defeated, and we beat the Nazis and such, but the networks of capital survived in many cases, and many corporations got a good start from Nazi Germany.
Yeah. Um, I don't believe capitalism like some believe that capitalism inherently leads to fascism, but I believe it is the breakdown of a healthy system that leads to such an occurrence. When the Weimar Republic, prior to the rise of the Nazi Party, um, there was hyperinflation. Germany was, at least culturally, there was like a belief in a stab in the back myth. There was humiliation, a loss of pride, and many other compounding factors, along with the overly stressed markets, which were hit by the Great Depression. And that culminated in a desperation that made people believe that this charismatic speaker over here with the interesting mustache, he says that he can fix it all, and things are bad, and maybe it might just be worth giving him a little more power to fix things, which obviously didn't end very well. But when the system is coming apart, people will do whatever they can to try and find a solution, whether it is harmful or not in the long run.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do see that there are factors that go into it. I like it's not as though it's you can connect the dots between one input to one output.
I
And the
believe a
ones you
good
listed are
example of what, like, another like failure of like a capitalist system, like in the USSR, there was the attempting industrialization, which was progressing, but it was causing significant issues, and the stresses of World War One and other factors led to socialism popping up. So the revolution and breakdown of a capitalist system is obviously not one direction,
yeah,
but it can be taken a different way.
of
A
course,
successful example of the system not crumbling is in the United States, where there was a large unions building due to the monopolies and such stressing the American worker.
okay.
Successful
So
reforms, which busted apart these monopolies, allowed the system to sort of heal from that over that constraint of the market, and obviously is why America did not have a socialist revolution and still possesses like capital system to this day.
okay, so let's break down a few of those points. I think firstly, it's important to stress that whilst the fact that capitalism decays into fascism um, doesn't so capitalism decays into fascism, right? That doesn't mean that the fact that we haven't seen fascism yet in every capitalist nation or country doesn't mean that it's not a possibility, which I think is what the sort of point is with fascism. We're saying that capitalism, if left untouched and unfiltered, decays into fascism. America is an
I
interesting
bel
example because whilst there is
I
definitely
do believe that any system that is not
if you
properly
if I just finish this little bit and then if you come in
okay,
quickly, um,
okay,
if America has a history of, as you say, right, worker movements and labourers and such, and it's absolutely very important to highlight this because it's lost a lot in the like American dream. Oh yes, we're the most capitalist nation on earth. We've done everything business. Like no, of course, labourers did so much, and on top of that, America's history has not been, the nicest, right? You've got slavery, segregation, discrimination, genocide, like all sorts of horrible things happening. But throughout its history, it has been a capitalist nation. And the fact that you've still had that free market, that private control of massive resources, that commodification of labour, that capitalist free market and such, that has persisted, which has led to increasingly right wing turns. So even though you're quite right, things got better in American history. The New Deal and such, and the improvement of living conditions and such. The capitalist core has remained. The inequality has increased, especially with the neoliberal turn in the 80s and such. And now we're at a point where you've got fascists in government, you've got massive assault on civil liberties and freedoms in many, many forms. And yeah, the country is sliding. I wouldn't even say sliding into fascism. It's already a fascist government, and it's just how many degrees of fascism there are. I'll come on to the other things in a
Um,
second, but if you respond to that one quickly.
um, trying to think of how to start. I don't believe that America is currently a fascist nation, but I believe if the system is not checked in time and it slides further into authoritarianism, that it will eventually slide in that direction.
Yeah,
But I
I mean,
don't
there's an
believe it's
element
there yet
of
because there's still plenty of checks and balances which are preventing a full centralization of authority.
there's
In a fascist
some
nation,
checks and
the
balances.
separation between the the legislative, judicial, and all of the branches would be centralized into one, and it would be top down. Whereas the U.S. government is still Group A needs approval from Group B, but then Group C also has to check on it to make sure that Group A and B aren't doing anything suspicious. And I believe that because those systems are still, they might be in right wing favor, and you could say far right favor, but the fact that the balances still exist and they must go through the proper methods shows that there's at least some resistance to it. And in a truly fascist system, the checks and balances would have been smashed apart the second they got into office.
Is that true though?
So I don't believe
Like,
it is quite there, but I believe if it is allowed to get much worse and there is no checking of power, that it will eventually get there.
that's an interesting qualifier though, isn't it? A truly fascist system. Like, of course, I don't think anyone's saying America is exactly in the same place Nazi Germany was when Hitler was at the height of his powers, but it doesn't really matter, right? They're still engaging in fascist actions against their own citizens and overseas. They're still degrading and deconstructing their democracy. And for as much as checks and balances still exist, like that still isn't really, they're not enough for one, and they're being deconstructed as we speak. So, whilst I'm not sort of, in my mind, the conversation, we seem to be largely in agreement, right? Like, we're not, we can both identify there's major problems in that government right now, and it's not good for America and anyone on the planet. But in my mind, we have to, at this moment in time, be willing to call America a fascist country because, like, if not now, then when, right? When, like, he gets to the height of his powers and all that, and we're in an even worse situation. Like, I think we can learn a lot from Nazi Germany by, like, if people had been willing to recognize fascism then for what it was, then a lot could have been avoided. And I feel like there's still a large body of people in the US, a non-significant one, that are still unable to call this government what it is, a fascist government and a fascist system of doing things in America right now.
Hmm. Um, trying to. I'm just trying to process all of this.
It's all right. I mean, if I'm speaking too quickly, then just say.
I, I stand by my point that it is not quite at fascism, but it is, as I say, like it's creeping towards it. And I believe if enough of a counter reaction happens, I'm sure you know of the pendulum effect, where eventually, like something swings one way, and eventually it'll swing back the opposite direction in politics. How um, before there was a large Democrat control of the nation, and there was very liberal policies and such, and then now it's swinging back to where things are being more conservative. And I'm worried, like it's not quite full swing yet. It's swinging in that direction, but it's not quite there yet.
But
And
that's not good though, is it?
I
Like,
don't believe that the Trump administration is a fascist administration, but a fascist administration could stand on their shoulders and finish work that is pre-laid afterwards. And I want
but
my goal is to, or at least my belief is that the belief of decay and that the system is starting to fall apart that usually leads to this bed of support for fascism. I believe that if that corruption and such is fixed, that the swing will not quite reach that and it can be prevented.
yeah,
And
I
then it'll
mean,
swing back the other direction into more moderate policies. And then in your case, you could even lead to more social policies that actually benefit American workers.
whether or not there is a counter reaction to fascism, right? Like, because that sounds lovely, right? The idea that people will see the sort of full scale of conservatism, or they'll see conservative ideology and such. They'll see what Trump and his cohort believe in and think, yeah, this is awful. Let's vote in an even more progressive government to follow this. But firstly,
I don't vote.
I don't think that actually like counters the idea that we're in a fascist moment, right? Like the fact that it could get worse doesn't change the attacks on democracy, the assault on people's civil liberties, the disgraceful looting of the American state. You know, where they're just selling off federal land and such, and shutting down departments of the government to sell off to their favorite corporations and such. And secondly, there's still sort of the whole capitalist framework around it, right? Like the reason it's important to link it back to like wider parts of American history is that the commodification of resources and the private holding of people's essentials and stuff is part of the unjust things we're criticizing in both capitalism and fascism. Like, it's not as though everything was civil and fine and then all of a sudden Trump showed up. Like, there's been long-standing problems in America which have led to
Yeah,
this moment,
which I
right?
believe the reason that the Trump administration is so popular is that the corruption existed beforehand, and it's only gotten worse enough that people believe that um, this populism isn't exactly fascism, but can lead to fascism when enough fervor is put into it and enough, if that makes sense.
What do you mean by corruption? Like you said, the corruption was always there. Because I would
Um,
agree. But what are we saying? What are we pointing to and saying this is a corrupt element in society?
the free, I believe that like capitalism with like we should have regulation to avoid people with more starting money snatching up the industries. But I believe that overregulation to put it right in the hands of people who have the existing infrastructure to be able to accommodate them means that things loop around to being in control of the rich again. And thus, when you have monopolies or near monopolies, as in the current case, we don't have Standard Oil, for example, but when six companies control most of American communication, that is effectively a monopoly of sorts,
That
and
is the
there's
case
hardly
because of capitalism, though,
anything being
right?
done about
Like
it.
the reason markets are dominated by a small group of people is because they are capitalists which have successfully engineered capitalism, and regulation isn't the reason they've managed to do this. It's because they are excessively, they're extremely wealthy
I
capitalists
think
who
um,
own massive amounts of land and resource, right?
hmm, I think that you bring up like people who are manipulating the system to get I think every system has that problem, and I don't think any existing system or idea has a way to fix that. Because even in, say, socialist countries, they overthrew their existing power structure, but that system sort of built its way back together because corrupt corrupting people with malicious intentions, say, like obviously like Stalin centralized power in the Soviet Union, created a cult of personality around himself, and that experiment basically went back into authoritarianism wearing the mask of social liberation. And that is an example of power, like a good idea that doesn't think about what happens afterwards.
Well,
And
I'm
I
quite
think that is
glad
a very important thing.
I'm very glad you said Stalin wore the mask of socialism or social liberation and such, because it's, I would hope that people can recognise the lack of socialism in a Stalin-led USSR and such, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But touching on the idea that like systems have corruption and such, the reason some systems have more corruption and the reason some systems are inherently corrupted is directly tied to the way they organize themselves. And when a system, so American capitalism, for instance, which was obviously built on slave labor, right? Like they needed the unpaid forced labor of millions of black people transported across the Atlantic Ocean to build to build the US, right? And that's true of also my country. We needed the slave labor as well, and that's not just in terms of physical labor. That's in terms of also building the wealth and goods and control of resources in our nations. And so when we've got this underlying our system and sort of inherent in lots of our institutions and democratic structures, so-called democratic structures, this makes it very difficult to actually build anything just equitably and fairly, because you've got a massive unfair wealth disparity going in from the start, which is why we connect capitalism to these unjust power systems, and why then they devolve into the sort of fascist ones we're seeing now, right? I think that like you said, you said that capitalism can be nicer when you regulate it, and I would agree. It's better to. I'm never going to sit here and claim that like social democracy is equivalent to American style capitalism or equivalent to any form of capitalism. Like there's obviously degrees of it being better, but the wider point is that it decays. It when you have people with more resources and tell them the economic system we have is about making profit and money, they're going to use those resources to try and make more. They're going to go against those regulations, even when it's harmful to the whole society, even if it's something which seems like obvious to keep, like water regulations or climate change, or even just like not dumping your waste somewhere that people
Yeah,
will
I
have to
definitely
use
believe
someday,
in
right?
the decommodification of water, power,
But
and
okay,
say
yeah. So then, why doesn't that happen then? Like that is sort of the where we're
because
trying to
the
get at.
exist because the existing systems are rotting and the loopholes are being found,
But why
are
does that all
looping through
happen?
them.
Like, what's
Huh?
the economic incentive of polluting a river and not treating your waste? Like, it's not as because I
The
think we
economic exen-
go
the
ahead.
economic incentive of polluting a like for example, when a company gets large enough and it owns factories, for example, it doesn't it doesn't have to worry about polluting the rivers because it is so big that it can pay off the fines and it can eat the losses because cleaning up the river or adding the extra equipment that makes sure the river is not polluted at all and the waste is no longer toxic is so much more expensive than just eating a fine and continuing. And I think when companies get so large and they're allowed to grow so large, that problem will exist.
But that is the point, right? Like the company gets so large, like massive, like a nation, multinational spanning a transnational corporation, right? Managing tons and tons of resources, thousands of workers, it's just growing to an absurdly large scale. So they've got all this money, and they are in charge of resources everyone interacts with. Waterways are universal. We all are in contact in one way or another with some elements of the water cycle and water bodies and such. And yes, they end up polluting them. They end up, as you say, just thinking, well, we can't be bothered to sort this out. Let's just eat the fine or whatever. But the economic incentive is one capitalism provides them. They want to make as much money as possible and beat the other corporations and be at the top of the power structure. To deliver a profit to their shareholders and such. And so that's an inherent problem with capitalism, right? Like the idea that you would intentionally ruin, not intentionally, you would deliberately allow bad things to happen to the world we live in and bad things to happen in society because you'll make a profit from it is a flaw, an integral flaw of capitalism. But then it becomes fascism when said corporations are met with the threat of being asked to be more ethical, be more responsible. You said a second ago the Democrats were in and they're more liberal. I would contest the idea that they were like radical by any means. Like they're not, they're not like a far left party. They're centre right, basically. But
Most of their
the
leftist
point,
policies are basic issues and social justice issues.
yeah,
But in
they're
terms of
not pulling up
actual
any
left
trees.
wing problems, they're not actually that developed in those
Yeah,
sectors.
exactly.
And
But
those
the
who
point
actually
is
do
that
try to reform harder, such as say like Bernie Sanders, he's swept out of the way every single time an election pops up to avoid an actual shift leftwards.
I would agree, right? But the reaction to that from capitalists when they're like when someone looks at say a potential Bernie Sanders presidency where things which already exist in Europe are suggested for America, they panic and then they turn to Donald Trump and the far right and the MAGA movement and say, "Yeah, we'll be with you lot. Even though you're actively awful, you're going to protect our capital. You're going to keep us going." Hence, you saw at Trump's inauguration all those
I
tech
do think
billionaires who were there, right?
if that was the
Hello, I think your audio has just cut out.
if it would it
Just then.
wouldn't be the threat that it is without more local support, and that local support comes like a perceived degradation of quality of living. And does that make sense?
So like the first
Without
part
like
of
the
that cut
actual
out then.
popular vote, uh, well, um, if it was only the billionaires supporting like Trump and his five top circle members, I don't believe it would have gotten this far. I believe that a reason that it is as powerful as it is at the current moment is a belief in social and economic degradation that the other side is not willing to the Democratic Party, because they're also fairly bought out, is that they're not interested in talking about those problems. And because he points at the problems and says, I know how to fix them, he doesn't actually plan to fix them. But him saying that he knows how to fix them is what allows support to bubble up from below and push this into a bigger movement than it obviously should have been. And I
Mm.
believe that if there's reforms, say to cut apart larger corporations instead of focusing on social issues, that this large MAGA bubble right here would be popped under its own weight, because that bed of support of social and economic degradation would not be there to keep it floating.
So I have many responses fly from my head when I hear something like that because I agree with parts of it. Right, you're quite right. The Democrat Party, much of their sort of liberal, neoliberally rhetoric is much of the same. Right? Oh, we're better on the economy. We'll do this. We'll do that. Doesn't matter that it's true as such. It's better. The Democrats have largely managed America better than Republicans. But you're right. It doesn't speak to in a cost of living crisis in our modern world that doesn't speak to people. Trump says things which appeal to people's sense of actually addressing what's going on and saying there is a problem with society, and some people are convinced by that. But I think there's a trap there in some of that framing because, firstly, despite how many people do vote for Trump, more people don't, and more people aren't convinced than are. So I don't think it's and even with all that said, more like working class and poor and like marginalized people and such vote for Democrats than Republicans. Um, so I think there is still awareness to that. Secondly, I think that you can manufacture with those billionaires. Whilst you're right, it obviously needs. It's not as though you could win an election just on the vote of people who had $1 billion, but with $1 billion, you can buy a news network like social media, like Musk did with Twitter. You can affect the way people hear the stories you want them to hear. So, for instance, plenty of Democrats and plenty of people speak about the cost of living crisis, healthcare, um, education, defunding, all the important things people care about. But it will never make national news in the same way that like a scare story about a trans person or the latest immigrant um, fake hysteria or any of the other manufactured issues
I
that
believe there
right-wing
is
causes
issues
do.
with immigration,
Well, we'll come
but
on to
it
that in a
is
second,
sometimes
but
it is usually taken
the
out of proportion. I will agree with that.
yeah, but like we'll come on to immigration in a second, but like the point is that if you have $1 billion, you absolutely can influence how a lot of people think, especially if you are a bit tech savvy and can in control of a major platform people use. Um, and then thirdly, as well, with that $1 billion and with that existing support, you can affect the way democracy organizes itself, right? So
Yeah, a
Trump
major
supporters.
problem with American democracy is the corporatization because both sides have billionaire donors who can effectively pull the strings on any news network they want, and both throw the other networks at each other. And it shouldn't be a puppet show in the first place. The news stations can be biased, but they shouldn't be as biased as they are. And
But even this is a core problem, right? Like these news corporations exist to make money. They're business enterprises, which goes directly against it, like the idea that information should be something which is universal and open and factual. People, you're quite right. News stations lean certain ways and cover things, certainly in America, with certain editorial choices and such. But the wider point, which I think is missed a lot, is that in a capitalist system, this is what news is. This is, there's no, you aren't going to a news station and being told news. You're going to a marketplace and buying an interpretation of events as per the whims of the capital of people who wanted it to be a certain way. Now, even in this scenario, I think whilst it is absolutely true that some news stations lean certain ways, even in this scenario, like the Democrat, the way news is produced by like Fox News is, or any of those awful like conservative reactionary news stations, they are like degrees of magnitude worse than like the Democrat affiliated ones, which I should stress again are still right wing and still produce news in the same way. Um,
I think the
the
problem
wider
is
point,
that it
go
doesn't
ahead.
matter who. It would be one thing if the news is like they're selling directly, but the problem is that they've already been bought out and they are no longer selling out their own weight. Like if a right wing news organization wants to appeal to a right wing, then they can make their content how they want. But when a billionaire comes by, buys it up, and pumps money into it, it can just say whatever he practically wants instead of having to make itself float, which
Yeah,
is a disgusting corruption of what should be the ability to prove one's own merit on the market. If
but
if a company cannot, if a company does not have to face stress, it does not have to improve, and it does not have
the
to.
fact it's on a market though is the issue though, right? Like, can you see that? Because I was agreeing with you, right? Like, it is bad that a billionaire can just buy, put a load of money into a company and then silently delete all the articles that were, like, say, criticizing the atrocious human rights record of said purchasing corporation, right? But if it's left to a market, of course that's going to happen, because why would a capitalist not use their capital to expand their power? It's the same with what we were saying earlier about billionaires. Like, even the billionaires that are, the ones who are supporting the Democrats and who have said, yeah, we don't like Trump and stuff. I'm very glad they didn't like open fascism, but they've still used their billions to influence how the Democrats run themselves, which is why people have the disconnect with them. Because like, you look at
I think it's
like,
the problem is that the Democrats have been the current establishment party, and that is why their image is worse because
but
they've been at the
even that
forefront
is
of
that
politics for
that
longer, and that's why the Republicans are given more because well we haven't been in power that much, so you could give us a shot, and
that
people are
is
giving them a shot, and they're using that to obviously they're making as much room as they can while they're in power to
But
try
that is
and prevent a
entirely
swing back.
perception, isn't it? Like, that's entirely perception, because, like, there's no, like, for one, the Democrats are still a right wing party, they represent many of the same views. But for two, it's been a two-party system. The Republicans have had significant control in each house, Supreme Court, states across the country. Conservative thought is, it has massively influenced America, and we're only a few generations out of segregation and Jim Crow and stuff, right? Like, there's no way, like, the idea that right wing has been out of establishment and Democrats have been in,
I
or
believe, like, I don't believe it's like the larger macro scale of time. Like, if you obviously in the scale of the last 100 years, like we're just now getting out of this. But in
yeah.
the micro scale of about a decade or 2 decades, the Democrats have been in power, like at least at the big prestigious, presidential spot. A little like it's been shared, but I believe there's a perception that the Democrats
A
have been in there
perception.
longer,
That's the key, isn't it? A
and as
perception.
such, they're more responsible for current issues when it's really just an issue of both parties not really being very different, and they're
But
just peddling slightly different extra policies while keeping most of the main policies similar.
the key word there is perception, right? Because I agree with quite a lot of that. There's a lot of similarities between the two parties, but I think it's very important to stress that one is like a neoliberal capitalist party and the other is a fascist party. And even at their worst, the Democrats are still significantly better than Republicans on essentially every issue, right? The key thing though is perception. There is a reason people feel the Democrats are the idea that the Democrat Party can be an establishment party, but not the Republicans, who are operated by billionaires. And in the state, like, even just that sentence you said a second ago, right? The last decade, there's been Biden, and then a bit before Obama. Well, there's been Bush and Trump. There's been a Republican Supreme Court. There's been Republican control of every house of every branch of government, right? So the idea that someone could take that argument and use that as like their idea going forward, that has come from somewhere. And the answer is clear. It's come from bad faith right wing media, which is funded massively by people who want that societal control. There's a
I
reason people spend so much money on media, and it's because it influences the way a lot of people think, which is enough to gain political power in the US.
um, I do see what you're saying, but there is the fact that both parties are practically bought out by billionaires. And I
I
won't
agree.
say that the Republican Party is an inherently fascist party because it's bought out by billionaires when both parties do have their donors. I do
Yeah,
think though that the movement, like the MAGA movement, is a subsection of the Republican Party and is the more worrying issue. I
it's
don't
been.
believe that the party itself is. I do think that the two party system is a big problem, but I don't think like saying everyone who votes Republican is a fascist is a very good idea because
I
that
think
might
that's
push
a
them
separate point,
into
isn't it?
the.
Though
Hmm?
that's a separate bit of argumentation there, which we can come on to in a moment. But I
Okay.
do. So there's a distinguishing. You're right. Billionaires influence all degrees of politics. No one is saying the Democrats aren't also being influenced by capital and by wealth and such, right? Like, of course not. But the Democrats are a neoliberal capitalist party, which also has element. You look at there's still people in the Democrat Party who do fight for change. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, Democrats are great because they're not. There's loads of things we need to improve on. I'm not a Democrat. However, you find people with genuine wants for change and social justice in the Democrat Party. The Republican Party has become a fascist party because MAGA and Trump are the party now. They've taken over, which is another part of fascism, right? Like they take over political entities and get rid of anyone who's not. The conservatives who are moderate and maybe believe in the free market and whatever, but don't like the fascism and the authoritarianism and stuff, they are either quiet, they're bullied into being quiet, or they're just kicked out of the party. The people like you look 10 years ago, all the Republicans who were saying, yeah, Trump, he's a loser, we don't like him, he's racist and stuff, they're now in the administration, they've left entirely. Like, Marco Rubio spent years saying, oh, yeah, Trump's he's an idiot, he's leading the country terribly, we can't be like him. And now he's, Secretary of State? Ted Cruz is another one. Yeah, you've got JD Vance is another one. Like, they just toe the line or they're gone from the movement. And that's the point, because it's a fascist movement and because the system is now fascist, anyone who isn't with Trump and his government is an enemy of the state or enemy of the people. And even when they are Republicans through and through, people who believe in most of the same right wing ideas about society, they're treat like what's another one? John Bolton, who's now facing federal charges from the Trump administration. They don't care. Like, so I think that it's massively important to stress that yes, the parties both have issues, but it's entirely disproportionate. Like, the real issue is with the fascists. Democrats can be dealt with as part of the wider critique of capitalism, but like the Republican fascist lot, that's where we got to aim our crosshairs, right? Aim our focus.
With regards to the people who were insulting Trump and now toe his line, I think that's a general problem of everyone is for sale, and if you toe enough of their points, they will follow right behind you. If you're where the money's at, they'll follow behind you. And I think it's when you corporatize politics and you turn it into when you put um, capital of economy and capital of power in the same vein, authoritarianism follows, and I just think it's a disgusting because it's just a very disgusting occurrence.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I agree, right? Like, it is disgusting, but I think
I
that the
don't
next step
like I
then,
don't believe that many of them are inherently fascists. They're just sucking up to the where the money is or where the popular support is coming from. Because when you have popular support, you can get more votes, you can get more money from successful this and that.
but does it
And
matter if they're like inherently fascist? Like, I'm sure if I sat down with Marco Rubio and had a chat with him, we'd have many things we could talk about, right? But does it matter if what their political actions are are fascism, right?
Well,
Like, like actions speak louder than words, right? Like, I'm sure many of them are appalled at the idea of fascism, but they're still doing it. They're still signing off on stuff. And I think to touch on what you said a second ago, you're quite right. It is a shame that capitalism, the economic capital and political capital aren't kept separate, but they never would be separate under capitalism because your interest in that system is to build your capital. Yeah, no matter how you can, but the best capitalist has used their resources to get as much capital as possible, and for as much as it's important to regulate it, whilst that system's in place, of course, there's going to be a risk, and it's going to increase with time as people accumulate more capital. Like, why would you expect anything different of people, especially Republicans as well, but of people in a system that rewards you for gaining more and more and more, to ever not suspend their actual beliefs to go and side with Trump? Like, they're going to be rich. And so to address that, especially in this moment in time with so many things on the line, we've got to address the overriding problem, which is that the way our system is set up has some fundamental issues.
yeah. And I'm worried that like even if we prevent the rise of the MAGA movement, say like somehow or another, I don't know, JD Vance and Donald Trump mysteriously get into a plane crash or something, and the movement fizzles out. I'm worried that this commodification of politics will lead to, say, the left, like the Democrats, have a boost in power now, and they start doing the same things. And they start like, I believe that if a power accrues enough support from donors and power support in this current age, with the capital, the control of both, it'll just lead to the rise of a a communist party. Like this is um the big bad communist party that they're doing the evil stuff that the Soviet Union did. And I don't think it's because the Republicans are inherently fascist or evil. I think it's just because they're in power and they're allowed to do more of what they want. And the Democrats would do pretty much the same things if they were allowed to accrue the same power, and they shouldn't be
But
because neither of them.
I don't think those points quite connect though, right? Because like there's definitely a risk
I do
that like I
ramble
can
a
see.
bit.
So no, it's not about that so much. Like, but because everyone talks and such. I mean, I don't think I understood what you said, but the Democrats being a centre right party, that has overlap with problems within the system. I agree. There's definitely a risk that, say, the Democrats win the next election and don't improve things and keep some of the framework that Trump's put in place, but that framework is a uniquely right wing and far right one that has been built by years and years of right wing capitalistic policies, right? Like it comes from the Republicans, it comes from the thought process, which is right wing. And the fact that some Democrats are also really right wing isn't like, oh, the Democrats are bad, but specifically that right wing politics, which the Republican Party have wholly embraced, is the fundamental issue. Like if like with ICE, for instance, and the mass violence against immigrants, like that is fascism. That is something which cannot be kept in a society that has any principles of justice and fairness and such. It's fundamentally a wrong way to treat people. And unpacking how that is so awful and bad requires a level of analysis which needs to go beyond, we've got to have a capitalist structure. It has to look at society beyond. It has to think, actually, there's some fundamental issues with how we've been managing society for a very long time. So I think even just being like, oh, well, Republicans aren't all bad and Democrats could also do this as well. Like, it's ultimately a case of analysing critically fascism in this moment, capitalism in this moment. And if some Democrats are, culpable as well, then yeah, they've got to go. But overwhelmingly, it's the GOP, it's the Republicans, it's the people in power right now that are activating their fascist project onto America and the world.
Hmm. I'm
Right?
still firmly in the belief that if they, I think that like the MAGA movement is only doing as much as they believe they can get away with, and that if the
But like,
Democratic Party believe they could get away with their own fascistic policies, they would. But because the policies have swinged away from them, that they are not as that they're more willing to say that this is evil and this is worse when both parties are objectively disgusting.
like yes, I agree in a sense. The Democrats have many things which are terrible, but I mean, Raptor says it in the chat, right? The Republicans are doing a fascism right now. So for as much as I 100% agree, there's people, people in that party are, there's a lot of things that need to change with it, right? And there's some even who I would argue need to be off to court to justify some of their actions. However, in this moment in time, it is the Republican Party in control of government and actively destroying democracy and doing so many terrible things, which needs to be addressed. And the next comment from Raptor is important as well. Um, this is a project that has been in the motions for years. For years, they have been radicalized into increasingly right wing authoritarian positions. They've been disenfranchising people, they've been removing rights in their states, they've been packing their um, courts and party positions and such with just utterly deranged people detached from reality. Someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene should never be anywhere near an elected position, right? But here she is in House of Representatives running her mouth off every minute with some, whatever conspiracy theory there is now. In fact, in the government himself, there's no element of truth. It is 100% just lies. Like people who are in government right now spreading open falsehoods. The president himself just tweeting out nonsense. Not tweeting. What they call it, re-truthing. Just complete garbage. But to compare that to for the Democrats have their issues, yeah, absolutely, and there's serious things there. But I think to try and say, oh yeah, well they would do the same things. Like I don't agree with that at all. I think the issue is fascism. It should be opposed in all its forms. And the form which is clear right now is the far right project we're seeing from the GOP, and that's what's got to be identified.
I suppose.
Right.
Um,
To touch on what you said, actually, you
I'm not.
said, yes, sorry, we're going to say something, sorry.
It just. I'm just trying to figure out a way to um explain it, but not turn into a repeat of what exactly was said last time.
Well, no, express it however you feel.
I do think that there's a hyper fixation on Trump as this ultimate evil, that he is exactly the same as Hitler, when he is just the product of this general shift, and I don't believe that he is the end product of. I don't believe there's much to be done at this moment, but I do believe that we can still save things before they descend into proper fascism.
When you say a hyperfixation, what do you mean? Because, like, I don't think people are trying to. Yeah, I don't think anyone's saying Trump is certainly no one on the left, certainly no one like with left wing critique. No one's saying he is the god of fascism. He's emerged to destroy it. Like, but he is a president. He is like
Yes.
the central like cult-esque figure for MAGA that has taken over the GOP and is now the dominant political force in the country, right? Like, so there is going to be some focus
I
is
don't
going
I
to
don't
inevitably be on
disagree
him.
that he's bad, but I don't believe that he is necessarily the equivalent to, say, the Austrian painter. I don't believe they're the same, but I
But
believe he
I don't
is
think it
on the scale to
matters
that.
that they're like no one's saying Trump and Hitler are match for match twins, whatever.
They
But there's enough
they have
comparison for it to be warranted, right? Fascistic figures.
yeah.
Yeah. So then, what's the issue?
My
Like,
my problem is um I'm just worried that people will beat down on the GOP, but if, say, later down the line, if the Democratic Party starts to do suspicious things and to corrupt liberties the same way the GOP is doing, that because, well, they weren't the evil 5 minutes ago, that they're not the evil 5 minutes later now. I believe that both parties should be shown the same vigilance, and the monopoly of power should be cracked apart.
well, I can agree with about an principle, right? Like, because I do agree with the fact that there are problems with the Democrats, right? Velkin says the Democrats' inaction made this fascism possible. They stand to consolidate power just as much as Republicans. Both parties are in effect the same. And whilst I don't necessarily agree with the last sentence there, like there is 100%, an element of criticism we should have the Democrats held to. But firstly, that is a criticism of them supporting right wing policies which are bad. When Biden talks about ICE favorably, like that is bad. Like that's what we're criticizing. I don't think that I don't think it's a situation where like say AOC or not Bernie Sanders or
Like, an example I think of where the
you know it's,
Democratic Party is let off with doing suspicious things is Biden is, he's praised as being more left wing, and he's more palatable and he was praised as being very, like, pro union, when I believe there was a labor strike or something with the railroads, which was cracked down on and then swept under the rug.
well, that's something to criticize, yeah, because the Democrats are a right wing party which are a capitalist one, right? But that's different. That's not in the same proportion as the open fascism of Republicans. That's what essentially every right wing neoliberal party does in Western capitalism. They're like, of course, they're against the true freedom of the workers because they're part of a capitalist system. That doesn't contradict the fact that the GOP are right now the open source of fascism, right? Like like Raptor says, the, the GOP are the ones doing the fascism right now, and I absolutely think that it's important to recognise that the Democrat Party are part of a system which has led to this moment, but there's a massive difference between neoliberal capitalism and sort of right wing parties which aren't good versus the open evil and terror of fascism, which right now is ravaging the US and is making its way through my country, the UK, and others around the West and the
Um,
world.
Someone's asking what fascism means. Do you
Well,
mind if
it's
I describe if I try to describe?
yeah, but
Um,
we can both give a a definition
okay.
or like an explanation. Go for it.
My my definition of fascism is is sort of a worship of the state and a consolidation of political and economic capital. It's effectively authoritarianism and Darwinism coming together to um I had an idea in my head and it's not coming out the way it's supposed to.
I mean,
In
I would agree with a lot. Sorry, keep going. Sorry, I didn't realize you hadn't finished.
So, say, in Hitler's Germany, you were expected to worship Hitler and to worship the party with him as the face of it. And the party, according to, the party itself, is Germany itself. And whatever the party says is good because, well, you don't want to hurt the nation, do you? And the health of the nation comes above everything else, which is why they were so willing and so eager to commit atrocities because, well, it doesn't matter if we killed 10 million Russians. This space is cleared out, so say 100,000 Germans or Aryans in their case can settle here, and that'll make Germany better. Or um, these people can be put in camps and or even just sent out into Siberia because, well, they're not our problem. They're just burdens on the state. If you can't have kids, then you shouldn't exist, or you shouldn't be allowed to exist here because it is a drain on the state. The state is the end all and be all of fascist thought, and it's effectively authoritarianism with a social Darwinist twist taken to its most extreme point. And anything it can
So,
corrupt or eat to get more power in leverage of the state is fair game.
so there's a lot in that definition, which I would agree with. I think
Yeah.
definitely there's the authoritarianism. No, I'll say, in fact, there's a lot. It's important to explain it, right? Um, Authoritarianism, yep, I agree. That element of social Darwinism's in there. The convergence of capital onto the state.
Do
And we'll answer Muzz's next question in a second.
okay.
But there's also the element of I think Raptor here says far right. Velkin says capitalism and fascism, peanut butter and jelly, and jam for us Brits. But that is an important part of it as well, right? Like, because where we say the worship of the state, you're quite right. Like Nazi Germany, Germany, the Führer, Hitler, like it's all sort of merged into this cult-like worship. But this is in service of people who want to become very wealthy and want to gain power. They're using the state as their vehicle. They would use other forms of social organization if this was in a different society, right? Like, it's why people who the Republicans right now, for instance, saying like, yeah, the state shouldn't interfere in your life, right? As they're increasing state surveillance and state powers over citizens and such, and they're only saying that because it's the necessary words and phrases and power structures they have to engage with to gain more
Yeah.
power,
They're
right?
saying exactly what people want to hear right as they want to hear them,
Yes,
which
yeah.
is
But
why
at the same time,
people
though,
are
like
willing
that
to
is
listen.
yeah, but it's still a radically right wing one, which is built on capitalist structures, right? Like it's still that is like even you spoke about like ethnic cleansing and like forcibly moving people out of land and such, and claiming, for instance, that the land belongs to you inherently. It's the natural land of the Germans, of the Italians, of the Brits, of the Americans. Like this is ultra nationalism, like Raptor says, but this nationalism is also a product of the capitalist project, right? Like the land, they want to be theirs because they want more power and resources to dominate them, over others, right? Like they want to maintain their power, they want to build their power as a capitalist wants to, and so that is why the connection has to be made because it's comprised of the same power structures, it's the same ideological components, which is why all the time these fascist movements are bankrolled by billionaires and supported by many corporations and attract right-wing people, and on top of that are built with the same bigotries like Raptor again. America has always had authoritarian ultranationalist leanings, like of course because it's a country built on slavery. Like what is the racist colonial project but not an expansion of capitalism, but an expansion of capitalism, right? Like you're taking people and turning them into a commodity, literally, for you to make more money from, to generate more resources from. And so Nazi Germany has to be understood through that lens because that is the same behavior. It modeled itself on the actions of America with its treatment of black people, of the indigenous population. Let's use concentration camps as an example. They were a crime against humanity, right? They are a terrible thing. We know everyone recognizes pretty much, apart from the really awful people, but like the Holocaust and the imprisonment of people, for political beliefs, gay people, disabled, all manner of people. Like it's terrible. But what often isn't spoken about is the fact that they were envisioned in a capitalist sense of just free labor. They've gone to these camps and they're worked until they die. Like you've essentially here commodified people and turned their labor into something, a resource you can pull and take. And the same thing happens in America now. I mean, these people that are getting arrested by ICE are part of the large mass incarceration project in America, which funnels people into prison systems where they're working, where they're producing money for corporations. Like the same elements are there. And yes, I know you said earlier it's not exactly the same, but it doesn't have to be. It's still a fascist project, and that's why it's so important to identify that.
They asked a question of, do you think Western countries are descending into fascism? I
Yes.
believe that I believe that they're descending into a populist fervor, as in the systems, like there's cracks in it and it's starting to show wear, and people are demanding that someone fix it. And I don't believe quite that it's reached the point where that one person who is genuinely trying to institute a fascist system has raised their hand and said, I know how to fix it. But I do worry that that timing could be any day, and it is very worrying.
Like, I mean, I agree, but like, can we not? Do you not think that
Also,
like
I don't believe that, say, like like, do you think we can agree on this, that authoritarianism is disgusting in all of its flavors, right?
yes,
Say, if
authoritarianism is
like
bad?
how the Soviet Union displaced people into Siberia from, say,
Yeah, 100%.
Latvia
That's yeah, terrible. I
for
agree.
the,
But
or how they
I
also cracked down on the LGBT movement in their borders until, I think, they, since the Stalinist period, like it was just not allowed.
yeah,
So it's not
because
necessarily. I think
I agree. I'm not like
authoritarianism doesn't care what flag it waves, but it has its own particular flavor. Which,
I think
like,
that
fascism is the social Darwinist variety, whereas you can
the
say,
right wing, yeah,
um, I don't want to say socialism because socialism has many, many flavors. Some, I'll say, like, Marxist, because Marxist has been the more widespread. Um,
I mean,
like,
I
it's
don't
the
think we
more,
could call
when a
I
lot of
don't think
the
we can call this.
existing regimes, which stemmed from it, focused on that particular. You could say Marxist-Leninist, to be most specific. How
I don't think we
they
could call
justified their atrocities for the good of the people, even though they doing the same amount of spitting on them as a fascist government did. And I
so.
don't believe I don't. This is why I don't believe that it's an inherently, like, capitalism. Um, like, I keep I keep losing track of where I'm going, but I was going where I needed to go.
Okay.
I don't believe
I
that
don't think that
authoritarianism is necessarily a right wing. Like, it's not necessarily, like, because it's a right wing problem, that I think it's just a general corruption issue.
like I mean I see what you're saying, but I don't think it quite connects, right? Like authoritarianism is inherently like right wing because it is about hierarchies. It's about like authority. If you want power over others, then you are engaging in right wing discourse, whereas left wing is about breaking it down. Now, you said yourself, right? Like the people in the Soviet Union and in other systems said they were doing things for the people and then did atrocities, and I would agree that's exactly what happened, right? But someone claiming they are communist or Marxist does not make it so, and I think we actually agree about it. I don't think there's actually disagreement here on that, right? But So then, like to say authoritarianism comes in many flavors, like yes, but underlying it is the same root causes, right? And I think especially with nations like the Soviet Union,
I
like
don't believe
so,
America is fascist. I believe it's like a corporate authoritarianism, which
that
you may
in that
interpret as fascism.
I wouldn't
But I don't
interpret it as
believe it is
fascism.
that it has that same social Darwinist direction that
What do you
fascism
mean by
itself
social
is
Darwinist,
actually.
by the way?
Hmm?
What do you mean by social Darwinist? Just like, for the sake of this conversation, like,
You're aware of the term survival of the fittest, right?
yeah, yeah, like yeah, of course, yeah.
The
Like,
healthiest creature will survive. Well, like, Germany must fight everyone, and if it's beaten, then obviously we aren't the fittest. But we keep winning, so this proves that we're better than everyone else, and thus we have
would
our
you?
right to
Yeah,
exist.
okay.
And
So then that
fascism is determined that this this people in their nation have more right to exist than others, and this particular group is more socially and physically and in every metric that they are better than the other groups and deserve more resources, more attention, everything.
so I think that like survival of the fittest is one element of what Darwin said about evolution and such, right? Like if you can adapt, then you can survive better than others, and yeah, that's obviously taken by right wing people as like a mantra for justifying their own ideas. We're the best because we we're the most resourceful and whatever, and I think that that is absolutely in American society, right? Like you have all sorts of eugenicist type arguments being made right now by people in positions of power. Like just the way that neurodivergent people are spoken about by Republicans is disgusting, and a quite clear example of the idea that oh well they are weaker, they need to just get by, and if not then too bad. The where like autism, how that's spoken about, the idea that people on welfare need to just get by and not handouts from the government and such. Like millions are going to be suffering from the planned cuts and the existing cuts they're going for. Like that attitude is 100% in right wing discourse, and not even in overt fascism. It's been just a staple of right wing discourse for decades now. Austerity cuts to benefit programs and such, cuts to education. It's all in the name of oh well we want to take resources for ourselves, and then justified through some free market nonsense about how it should be. Excuse me.
Um,
Sorry, I'm coming through a
making
cold.
hello.
I'm still here. Keep going.
It cut out for a second.
I did. I was coughing. I didn't want to sort of cough down the mic. Um, but yeah, like we to again link this back to what we were saying about other like systems, just to sort of move away from social Darwinism for a moment. Like the reason it's important to distinguish fascism as a connection to capitalism and to be authoritarian and such, and even to say it's different from like the Soviet Union and stuff, is because of the explicit connection to the capitalist structures and such, right? Um, Even nations like the Soviet Union did many terrible things under like leaders like Stalin, but it didn't. It's like its existence is mediated by a capitalist world. People in Russia wanted change from a brutal, oppressive czarist system. They fought their change and they wanted revolution, and that revolution was justified. It was good to do what they did to try and make things better. But because it existed in a capitalist world and capitalism is threatened by people fighting for change, the powers of that system, fought against it. Obviously through boycotting it and directly affecting its ability to spread
Yeah, I know during
similar
the Russian
revolutionary
Civil War
goals.
there was numerous interventions.
Yeah, yeah.
Though I do
And
think
then on top of
after
that,
the situation stabilized and the world realized they're not getting rid of this the red wave over Russia, that it should have had some breathing room to experiment more, but because of the corruption in the inner party and Stalin's power plays, he sat himself on the top. And while it wasn't a social Darwinist, like it didn't go that direction to where it turned into straight fascism because it wasn't a this people are above all others. It was just we're we're killing you for your own good,
but that
and
is
it's good because I
also
said so.
that's also part of the same right wing problems. Like the world does, no, for one, I don't think the world thought, yeah, we'll give this some time. Like they wanted it done from the start, so of course they're gonna go against it. But someone like Stalin is also following right wing logics by firstly limiting the international scope of what they plan, because the idea, the whole point of communism is that it's meant to be like a workers around the world thing, break down nations as projects of capital and have everyone around the world working together, not in one country, not following the same horrible nationalism. Like part of the reason the atrocities happened against peoples across the USSR was because it became a nationalist project, right? Because Stalin and his ideologues and such, they didn't believe in a left wing vision of society. And by the time people closer to that of what might actually be called socialist were able to take charge, damage has been done. It's isolationist. It's cut off from the rest of the world, and it isn't able to compete on a capitalist globe. Obviously, it's important to stress that the Soviet Union and other such nations still had areas that were considerably better than Western nations on. And critically, when the Soviet Union returned to Western capitalism, in the 90s and such, it was a horrific disaster. Shock therapy was a terrible decision in Russia, the effects of which can still be felt today, where there's mass poverty, you know, dramatic
Yeah,
inequality, corruption.
it
We want to talk about
shifted too
corruption
fast, too
in Russia,
hard,
right?
and not properly for any
But
good change to come from
yeah, and then
switching
the
systems.
consequence, the consequence then of that is now, Putin, who I think would also be fair to describe as a fascist, basically, because you know private control of state resources. You look at the money which has been funneled
I
out
definitely
of
say Russia is more of a fascist country than the the US is because the Russians are treated as better than the other groups. They're more willing to take, say, this indigenous group from Siberia and throw them into the front lines for the sake of ethnic Russians. And Putin is the state, and Putin says this is good, so you must agree that it is good.
yeah,
I
but
definitely think Russia is farther along in that than the US is, but I'm worried that
yeah,
the US could reach that scale
and that's the
of
legitimate worry
things.
to have. But at the same time, like the same things are true about America, right? Like for what America has indigenous populations which are mistreated and incarcerated and policed, and marginalized populations certainly face heavier scrutiny from the government because of the white supremacist project that America has. They have a leader that wants to be unquestionable, wants more power than God, basically, and a political party that shares the same desire for total power. Project 2025, right? Like that's the whole point, to basically consolidate power and be a conservative force forever, essentially, for to stop the perceived enemies of their movement from ever challenging American ultranationalism again, right? Like, of course, it's not exactly the same. Of course, I don't think anyone's saying like America is exactly like Nazi Germany and exactly like Russia, but it is still fascist now, and it's still like there's no it's not like a science experiment where you can't call it something unless it has exactly a certain amount of criteria. Like it's a scale, and when you start on that scale, unless you call it out and stop it, like to an effect, you're gonna end up there, right?
You cut out for like that last like 2 or 3 sentences.
Oh, did I? Oh no. I hope I'm
Yeah,
being heard still.
it was doing the robotic thing again, and like
Oh, I see. Okay. So yeah, I was just saying, like, it's like it's a time scale, like it's a spectrum and such, but it's one which isn't set by strict parameters. Like once you're engaging in fascist activities, like fascism is on its way, and there's no point being like, well, we're not actually at fascism yet because you've got a problem if it's even on the cards,
mm,
right?
yeah, I guess
Um,
um my big worry though is that there's like a conflation with conservative equals pro-capitalist equals fascism, and well, Trump is a conservative, so he's fascist, so he is, and he's also he says he's a practicing Christian. I don't believe he is, and I believe that I don't like the idea that conservatism equals fascism, because obviously that turns into, well, we must say take down the Christian church because, well, it's the root of all of this fascistic evil, when it isn't.
I think that
I don't
yeah,
believe
yes.
that. Um, sorry, you can continue.
I was gonna
I
say that
definitely don't like Trump. I don't. I definitely would prefer if any like 100 other people were in office instead of him.
yeah. I mean, I don't get the impression that you do like try. I don't, no, I don't think that's his the
I
like.
don't.
I don't get that
It's
impression
like
from you.
defending. Like when you have a like when you're trying, like you're defending one of two evil things, and it's not very nice to have to like a murderer and someone who does questionable acts to women. Like, you're the murderer is not as bad, but he's still a murderer. Please arrest him too. Just he's not as bad as that guy over there.
Okay. Um, what we I was gonna say. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Let's go. You yeah. So okay. So yeah. A conservative is not necessarily inherently a fascist. I agree. I don't think anyone claims that, but critically analyzing conservative ideology gives you quite a lot of overlap with fascist ideology, and that is also true of capitalist ideology. Now, they aren't inherently the same thing, there are differences, but the reason they all overlap is through a central set of ideas about hierarchy and power. Now, it's not a coincidence that all the fascist movements have lent on, I think Velkin said earlier, with fascism, there is often a desire to return to idealized past that likely didn't truly exist. And this is also true of lots of conservative ideas, right? Like they also believe that there's some past ideal or past status that there should be in society. And this is quite a open statement, right? Like, because you could apply this to anything. We want the environment to be better again. Well, it's not conservatives saying that, is it? It's conservatives often deny that climate change is a thing happening. We want there to be a healthier school system where people have school classrooms which are funded and teachers aren't having to buy glue sticks out of their own money. Well, they don't want to conserve that either. They're not interested in funding education. They're trying to abandon the Department of Education. What they're interested in conserving is their capital. their wealth, their power. They're interested in social models which preserve the social hierarchies that were seen in the past. So, patriarchal ones, cis heteronormativity, racial hierarchies. And so that leads them to fascist thinking because they engage in power structures which exclude, which dehumanize, which disenfranchise. And there is going to be some balking at that because conservatives would never, no one, very few people sit and say, yes, fascism is what I want, fascism is my system that I choose. But critically analysing it, conservatives and people on the right are far, far, far more susceptible to fascism and to these ideas because when we really look at it, there are a lot of overlapping and similar ideas just inherently there. The system that is set up to consolidate power and capital is always going to lend itself to old fashioned, antiquated power structures and systems, which is then always going to be built and core to the ideas of fascists who want to preserve their hierarchies and, as we were saying earlier, expand their land and go back to women being just mothers and people who stay at home and raise the kids and gay people not being something they have to think about and such. Like, of course it's all there.
Oh, were you? I thought you were gonna say something else. I
No,
thought you
sorry,
were gonna continue a bit more.
the gap was for you to jump in.
Um, I'm trying to think of a response,
You could say,
how
I
to
agree.
explain things, because I have a habit of rambling,
No, not
and
at
I'm
all. I
I'm
mean,
trying to make sure I don't ramble on like I did with the definition of fascism.
say what your heart feels
Huh?
or mind.
Yeah, I definitely don't like. I'd definitely be willing to say that the conservatives don't really choose a lot of, like, they definitely have a problem with this issue should be common sense and everyone should agree to it. But we won't do that because it follows more in line with what, the billionaires want. When, like, for example, environmentalism, a general, like, a general conservative belief is that, we should make, like, if we're trying to preserve the past, that should include the environment. And, burning down a forest to mine some new aluminum deposits spits in the face of that, but it makes them money,
Yeah,
so they ignore it.
exactly right. Like, I
Or,
completely agree with that. What you've just said, then, like your explanation of how that happens. Like, yeah, 100% that's what's happening. And that's why it's important to connect the dots. Conservative discourse, capitalism, fascism. The conservative believes in conserving power and conserving a way of things being how they were, where might be an intervention to think, yeah, let's conserve the environment is displaced by right wing media and as billionaire funded stuff, which says not only is it the right of the businessman to do what they like, but the climate change that is scientifically proven is just not happening. It's all fake. And then through these conspiracy theories and eventually the sort of false
and also,
declaration of enemies, there
in
is fascism.
regards to, like, say, like, in regards to Christian values, another thing conservatives like to toss into the trash is that you're supposed to be able to be kind to, say, like, for example, I was born with autism. It was not due to vaccines or because my mom drank mercury when I wasn't born yet or something. That's
Hmm.
just not a thing. You can't.
Exactly, right?
It's just a, like, a series of bad luck or like a genetic issue that just
Just
happened to
just
get
part
passed
of
to
life.
this person.
Doesn't even have
Yeah,
to
it's just
be
a part of
any of
life,
those things, right? Like it's just
and
like
they believe
it is.
like it's treated as some sort of disease that needs to be cured, and we can make money off of trying to cure this disease, which real like it's really not a disease in the first place. It's just a condition.
It's an awful thing to say, isn't it? That it's a disease, and I think you're quite right that it betrays
And
what
you
should
should be
be
able to show
Christian value.
kindness, it
Yeah,
not curl your nose in disgust and try to eradicate something that people have no control over.
exactly, right. And I think
Um,
that again sort of
and
speaks
there
to.
some
Oh,
earlier
so go
colonial
ahead.
American like show kindness to people was thrown out the window when it came to making money off slaves or settling new land. Though I don't imagine the indigenous issue. I think like it was sort of a series of like there was some malicious actors, but I don't believe that it was at least initially like this evil plot. I think it was just something that was existing problem, like where smallpox ravaged the continent, and you know, hey, there's all this open land that we can build towns and mine resources from. So we better cart over there and set up shop before somebody else does, which only exacerbated the problems.
Would you argue that was the problem that they? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously they. Well, actually, no. That's not even true. I was about to say they didn't know, but people, Columbus and the sailors from his generation were not the first Europeans to make it to the Americas, right? Leif Erikson did like
Yeah.
300 years before, so they could have put two and two together and realized that they wouldn't be the first ever people to set foot in a land just because they were the first Europeans there. But I think the land expansion is something which should be scrutinized. But just rewinding very quickly to the like Christian, supposedly religious people having really awful views and such. Um, that is also a core part of our critique of conservative elements and how it is similar to a lot of far right discourse because the reason someone might make horrible statements about autism or any form of neurodivergence or any medical any condition anyway is because of that idea of normal, and then the other, like like we sort of said earlier, many of the things which neurodivergent people have, which makes them stand out or makes them sort of stigmatized and medicalized, are things which are just going against capitalist ideas, right? Like someone who finds it hard to process things, like or gets like overwhelmed emotionally by certain things, like that isn't some inherent failure on their part. They're just not able to perform in the capitalist set of rules and standards in the market, right? Like someone who finds busy places a bit tricky, say, like that's not like some endemic failure. It's just something which makes them stick out in a system which demands immediate selling of your labor and immediate placement on the
Um.
market, right? So we can, even in those little moments, unpack the way that right wing discourse influences the conservative mind, influences the bigotry that is produced, and then leads to the fascist world when they when it's not um, properly dissected.
You were cutting in and out, and I
Oh
was
no, it's my
there was
really.
a question about what do you think of Kemi Badenoch talking about conservatism mission of conserving liberalism? Um,
Well,
I
Kemi
do I'm
Badenoch.
not familiar with this example actually, so
She
I can't
is
say much about
the.
it.
Do you know who she is?
Um, I have never heard of her once in my life,
Well,
unfortunately.
I don't blame you because she's a bit of a joke, really. She's the current leader of the Conservative Party in the UK, which is the main opposition party in the UK. Though it's rapidly losing popularity, it's been overtaken on the right by Reform. Who have you heard of Nigel Farage?
Um, I've heard his name and heard that he heads the Reform Party.
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
haven't heard say much on their exact policies.
Well, you are a very lucky man,
Just generally
because
that they promise to reform things and do what the other two parties aren't willing to do, which is, eyebrow raising.
yes, yeah,
But
definitely.
I don't live in the UK. I can't exactly vote um, for or
Well,
against them to really find out what happens.
well, you summed up them quite well. Yes, they are a. They wouldn't call themselves far right, but if you look at what their policies are and what their and you put two and two together,
That's the
yes, they
thing
are a far
about
right
far
party.
right, like with the media, you know, um, there's been by a bunch of obviously like people who have family or they're Jewish like directors and stuff. There's been this mission to portray the far right and fascism in the worst light possible, and it's no one wants to be the actually say like yes I am far right because that just you may as well wear a bright red shirt that says I am evil. So no, I don't think any group worth like that can actually think critically is going to describe themselves as far right
Well,
or say
exactly.
that they are because of course that's just bad for business.
Exactly. It's all about branding. They have far right beliefs, but they can't. Well, it's a hard task to sell it if you want to try and get into power, which is why they rebrand themselves and call themselves new things and such. Um, just to answer this question, and we'll probably head to somewhat of a conclusion soon because it's getting late in the UK,
Yeah.
and
I figured it
I've
was
been thinking
starting
for a
to
little
get
bit.
a bit later over there.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, so I suppose this question is a little bit engineered towards me, as obviously Muzz is Scottish, as I found out yesterday. Um, the conservative mission of conserving liberalism. So I suppose um, liberal as an adjective has so many meanings, right? Like some people would use it to mean like someone who's not a conservative. Some would say it means left wing. Some would say it's more of a conservative thing. You know, like from the 17th and 18th century of like free speech and such, and enlightened ideas and logic and such. I would take this person, Kenny Badenoch's meaning, to be liberal markets, liberal capitalism, liberal attitudes of debate and free speech. Because Kemi Badenoch is a reactionary conservative who loves engaging in typical culture war nonsense. She any contentious issue she'll talk about. She's very vitriolic. She loves riling up conversations about stuff. She is. I don't feel sorry for her because she's not a very nice person at all. But she is unlucky that Nigel Farage is popular in this moment because essentially she doesn't come across as the alternative to Starmer at the moment. She just comes across as an opportunity. Like she comes across like someone on some like far right video online. She doesn't come across like a serious politician whatsoever. But when she's talking about conserving liberalism, she is like almost like a dog whistle for like maintaining right wing attitudes, maintaining the ideas of the conservative project and such. Obviously, they believe that like Keir Starmer is some communist or some like extreme radical left winger when like he is quite right wing himself, and the Labour Party are clearly not that. But they want to make this country even more right wing. They want to leave we've got a human rights bill, the European human rights bill, which they want to kick us out of so they can gut workers' rights and such even more. They want to liberalise, which means privatise and deregulate anything that hasn't yet been privatised in Britain. So, like, we've got the NHS, they want to completely get rid of. We've got state control of like education they want to do away with. Essentially, it's a right wing project to make more money. You know, they want to. But the Conservative Party, want to appeal to like billionaires and American money and such to come and make more business friendly policies in the UK. And they phrase it like this because it sounds better than just saying that outright. Would be my response to Muzz's question. My voice is starting to go, so I may uh, put the finish line in sight for this one and ask you whether you feel that. Oh, or actually, I would ask you. There's a very interesting video from someone called Innuendo Studios, who ask you to imagine the Rubicon. You know, the place that Caesar famously crossed on his conquest of Rome. Where would be the line that you would say fascism? Where would you feel comfortable calling this moment in time in America and the world a fascist moment? Where would you
Could
say?
you repeat that, please? You're
Oh
breaking
no,
up
is it cutting
again.
out again? Oh no. Sorry. I would as a TLDR. When would you say fascism is here? When are you comfortable calling this fascism? Saying America is fascist. When is that moment for you?
I think it's when um, a good way to tell is when, like, usually fascism's pretty mask off when it gets to it. It's when there's no term limits. Like, I would probably start saying, like, yeah, this is not when they start trying to suspend term limits. Term limits is a really big vocal, because you can mess around with the power structures and then you can concede, and then the party before, like, that comes after you can come and kind of sweep up the mess. But if wait a second, we're in power. I don't need to step out of the chair, and I can have three, four, five, six, 7 terms, however many I want. It would be a pretty open declaration of contempt for democracy, because that's the mask off moment when there's an amendment directly that says you cannot have more than 2 terms. So if you try to snatch a third term while doing these policies, I definitely would say that, like, that they need to be stopped at this moment, not another day in
Hmm.
office.
Yeah. I would agree that it would be a very scary moment. I think that I would recommend having a look at the current actions around voting rights, which the Republican Party are engaging in, because we're well on the way to that being a reality, and we're also witnessing cutbacks on democratic processes as we speak, and have seen for a very long time. But I will say that this probably is the end of our discussion for today. At least it's been very interesting talking to you. Thank you for coming on. It's been hopefully you've enjoyed the conversation as well, or you've found something from it. And perhaps we'll do the second part at some point if we ever have another element of your topic to discuss. But for now, we'll fly the finish line flag. Thank you for coming on, Smarter Boy, and take care, all
It
who are
was
listening.
pleasant to come over, and
Absolutely.
yeah.
Take care, all.
May I
Keep
say
it.
something before I leave?
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Um, I think that discussions like this are important because when an ideology is say self-assured and it's not willing to hear the other person out, that is usually a point where rot starts to show. So you and me being able to talk and like go back and forth without turning into a screaming match is important, because it shows that whatever our exact ideology and beliefs are, that we're open to um, fixing the dents in the armor and trying to self improve. Because if something is healthy and it deserves to exist, it should be able to find its weaknesses and improve. And I think that this is a good thing that we can talk this out.
Yeah.
It was very
Well, it's
pleasant
been
talking to you.
Thank you, and you as well. Plenty to agree with there. Right, thanks everyone for listening. As always, if you're interested in conversation, then feel free to leave a message or comment or anything. And yeah, take care all. Night, everyone.